Alright, so let's look at how we're going to change the spark plugs on this 115 horsepower Mercury motor. I'm going to show you a couple different things that I think will make this job easier for you. Let's look at some of the tools that we're going to be using to change out the spark plugs on my boat motor. First off, I'm going to recommend that you get a 5/8 of an inch deep well socket. I'm going to use a 3/8 inch ratchet for that. Obviously, we're going to need some spark plugs. And I have a pack of 4 spark plugs. And I'm going to recommend that you have a torque wrench, but if you don't, I'll still tell you the torque specs to use. One additional thing that you're going to want is some anti-seize.
Okay, hold on just a second. Listen to that again.
One additional thing that you're going to want is some anti-seize.
Alright, since my eyes are closed, I'm going to let the video version of myself take a nap there while the audio version of me explains some information. The first thing is, I know this URL is really small, but that's where the information comes from that I'm about to show you. Okay, this statement about marine spark plugs comes directly off of the NGK manufacturer's website. And the first thing that catches my eye here is the first bulleted item that says trivalent plating. Now, I don't expect you to try to keep up with the text that's scrolling on the video, but I'm showing you this because there is some conflicting information between what Mercury says about putting anti-seize on their spark plugs versus what NGK says about it. Now, Mercury says that they recommend anti-seize if you're going to be using your boat in salt water, where the NGK website says due to the trivalent plating that they put on their spark plugs, there is no use for anti-seize, and in fact, in some cases, it can be considered detrimental to your engine. I think the primary reason that they're trying to get across is that when you put this anti-seize on there, it also acts as a lubricant and it allows you to over torque the spark plug when you're installing it by as much as 20%. So use your own judgment, and it looks like I'm awake again.
Alright, so let's look at some different information that I think comes in really handy when you're changing out your spark plugs. One is right here on the side of the motor, so I'm going to turn you to where you can see this. So there's a decal right here on the side of the oil reservoir, and it tells you exactly what you need to know. It says the spark plug is an NGK ZF R5F, and that the gap is 0.8 millimeter or 0.032 inches. And so by buying the 300-hour parts kit from PartsView, I actually got everything that I needed. I got the exact spark plug that it called for. Alright, so let's look at how we're going to take these off. And then I'm going to show you some tricks as we go. Most of these are going to be fairly straightforward. I'm going to start on the one that causes some people to have a few issues. So I'm going to pull the camera really close because I want you to see this. The very bottom spark plug is way down here, number 4. This causes people some grief because it's a little bit harder to get to. What I have found is that my 3/8 wrench with this 3-inch extender on it seems perfect for this, and I can get up and underneath here how I need to, and it works really well. So I'm going to show you the first trick that I think makes this job so much easier. These are on very tight from the factory. And what I found was sitting here trying to pull this off, though I could have eventually gotten it off. It's cold outside, my hands are cold. And so for me, I was looking for a way to get that off as fast as possible and make it easier on me. So what I found was it works perfect. A 3/4 inch wrench, I can slide in this opening right here between the 2 pieces of rubber that are on the spark plug wire, and I can actually use the manifold and press, and it pulls that out just so quick and so easy. Now these are numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so I'm not too terribly worried about getting that confused. Right here on the plug wire it says 1. 1 is at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and take them all off just to go ahead and get them out of the way. I'm going to do that same trick again. I'm going to slide this down. And there's number 2. Now they come with some kind of dielectric grease that's really colored yellow, it looks like, on side. So I don't want to wipe that off, and we'll leave that up inside there just like that. So that's number 2. Here's number 3. And finally number 4. The actual number 4 spark plug is turned at this orientation. All of these others have been turned sideways. This one is turned like this. So the only difference on this one is that I'll probably put this in from the side like this. I'm going to try to leverage this one out slightly in a different way just because of the angle that the bottom plug wire is turned. Now, I know that's probably a little bit difficult to see, but that's it right there. I will have to set the camera down. Then I'm just going to do the same process. I'm going to use the manifold and press, and that's loose. So now I have all 4 spark plug wires removed. It's time to actually get the spark plugs out. And you can start top, bottom, it really doesn't matter. But let's look at the first thing that we need to do, and that is check the gap on the spark plugs. Okay, so you have 3 sources of information, so you really should not get this wrong. You have the tag on the side of the motor, and this clearly tells you the spark plug number, and it also tells you the exact gap. You have the manual that comes with your Mercury motor, and it will tell you the gap. It'll tell you which antices compound to use, and it also tell you the spark plug. And then on the front of the motor, if you can't find this, and if you don't have the manual, on the very front of the motor, you'll have something that looks just like this. And once again, it tells you right here, 20 foot-pounds of torque, 0.8 millimeter gap, or 0.032 inch gap. Everything you need to know is right there. And that's on the front of the motor. So surely between the 3 of these, you'll have all the information that you need. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the gap on these spark plugs is accurate. And we're going to use our little spark plug gap tool to do that. Okay, so I have the spark plug in my hand and I'm behind the camera, and I want to show you what we're going to do to check the gap on these spark plugs. I've got an AutoZone little gap checking tool here, and what we're looking for is 0.8 millimeter or 0.032 inches. So I'm looking on this, and it's probably hard for you to see. Okay, but this one starts off at 0.020 and it goes to 0.030 and then 0.040. So what that means is right in the middle of these would be 0.035. So we know that each one of these little tick marks, and they're very small, but you can see these little individual tick marks, each one of those is going to be a thousandth. So starting way over here, we've got 0.03 hundredths, and then we've got 0.031, 0.032, the second little bitty dash. So what I'm wanting to do is make sure that this gap on this is relatively close to this right here. And now that I've got the plug on there, I cannot put this on here. So I know that it needs to be adjusted slightly, not very much at all. You put this inside that hole there, and you can lift up on this without putting any pressure on the precious metal on this spark plug whatsoever. You don't want to mess the diode up that you're looking at right here. So instead what we can do is, if I put this in this hole, you can see that I can lift up on this without putting any pressure on the diode itself.
I think it's actually called an electrode. It's this thing right here.
Okay, so that's the first adjustment, and let's put this in here and let's see how we did. Okay, I didn't do it much, but you can see even that alone moved it 1, 2, 3, about 0.03 of an inch. So let's take it out and let's move it ever so slightly. Again, I'm just barely putting any pressure on it. That's enough. And let's check. Didn't make much headway this time. Ever so slightly. And I'm going to check it. I'm just going to keep doing this. Okay, I'm up to about 0.030, so I know I'm very close at this point. There we go. I'm stopping right there. That looks exactly like 3.2. Perfect. All right, we're going to do that same process with this one. Oh, it's so close. It's ridiculously close. Spark plug number 3 and spark plug number 4. Oh, that's it. Perfect. And that's all 4 spark plugs. All right, so we have our spark plugs gapped. So now it's just a matter of removing them. And we're on the one on the bottom, which seems to cause people some issues from time to time. So you're going to kind of have to search for it with the socket as you go under it. There's a couple ways you can do it. Maybe take the socket off to start with and just see if you can feel. But if you will look at the orientation of the spark plugs that are still in here, you'll get a good idea of the angle that you want to turn this, as well as roughly the distance that you're looking for on this next spark plug. So if I look, the angle that I'm looking for is roughly an angle about like that. And it's also slightly tilted up. All right, so I've moved the camera because I want to share a tip with you here. I'm going to take the ratchet and I'm going to put the socket on the top one that's easy to get to, and I'm just going to kind of take note of the angle that this is sitting at. You can kind of get a good idea of the angle that it's at, and also if I take this out and put it on the next one down, I can kind of get an idea of the length between the two spark plugs here. And so what I'm going to do is, when I'm going down to the bottom one, because it's going to be so hard to see, I kind of now know that the angle that I'm sort of looking for is this angle. If this works for all of these, then it should work down here underneath this. To get started, I'm going to take the socket off the extension, and I'm just going to look underneath here, and you really cannot see it. It's something you just kind of have to feel. I can feel the tip of the spark plug right there. That's on now, and again, it's just the angle. Now that I've got the socket on, I can actually see that socket, and I can go in here and look for the back side of it. Just keep working with it. Okay, or you can just do the rest of it by hand. Bada bing, bada boom. Now I'm just going to repeat that procedure for all of these. All right, that one looks pretty good. So I'm looking through this guide again, and right here on page 65 of your manual, it says spark plug, and it says 20 foot-pounds of torque right here. So that's what we're going to be going for. All right, so we're ready. We've got our plugs gapped, and it's just the reverse of what we've already done. And in my case, I'm going to use my torque wrench, and it said 20 foot-pounds of torque. I'm going to make sure that I do not go over 20 foot-pounds of torque. We're just going to listen for the magic click. And now to get the wire out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and put number one back in place. And I felt it right there at the end pop into position. All right, number two. That's number three. Perfect. Okay, so you can get in there and do that with a deep well socket and a 3-inch extension. So you got to remember that on 1, 2, and 3, the wire goes out to the right and then down. But this one on the bottom, the number 4 spark plug, the wire sits straight up and down like this. So make sure you get that orientation right and don't try to put it on sideways like the others. But now you're just going to have to kind of try to feel underneath there until you think you found the plug, which somehow I think I found it first try. And then wiggle this around, and hopefully you'll get that same feeling that it snapped back on. I think I just felt it snap in. Okay, and that's going to wrap it up, but I do want to give you one tip in case you are not using a torque wrench or you don't have one available to you. The book says that you can put the spark plug in and tighten it down until it just becomes tight. It says finger tight, but it actually means get it in there and tighten it down with your socket until it finally just stops. And I don't mean put any pressure. I mean just turn it until it finally, you're like, okay, that's snug. So snug it up with a wrench and then go a quarter turn more, and that's it. Stop there. The book says put it in by hand and then tighten it a quarter turn, and that's not enough. I'm telling you, If you put that in by hand and just get it to where it just stops, and then you put a wrench on it and turn it a quarter turn, you're going to find that it is just total slop. It's still not tight. Put it in there, tighten it with the wrench until you feel it bottom out, and then stop. Get a good look at the wrench at that point, 45 degrees, and stop. Again, that's if you don't have a torque wrench. If you live in Roane County or anywhere near me, come to my house. We'll use my torque wrench and we'll get your plugs in for you. And that's going to wrap up swapping out the plugs.